This video uses AI to tell a real story, based on records and testimonies from the 30 minutes that decided the fate of the Titanic.
For decades, the sinking of the Titanic has been explained by a single moment: the impact with the ice. But historical evidence suggests the ship's fate wasn't sealed by the collision. It was decided in the 30 minutes that followed. Doors that closed, messages that took too long to reach their destination, calculations made under pressure. In that brief window, technical and operational decisions quietly reduced the chances of survival, minute by minute. Before we step into the 30 minutes that changed history in 1912, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from. Because now, we're going to reconstruct, step by step, how the RMS Titanic began to lose its race against time. In 1912, the RMS Titanic operates like a floating city, with hundreds of tasks unfolding at the same time. Deep below, boilers and engines demand a constant flow of coal to sustain speed and electricity. In the kitchens, crews work in sequence to serve meals across multiple dining rooms, while stewards move through narrow corridors with lists and trays in hand. On board, daily life is ruled by clocks, whistles, and short commands, all organized into precise shifts. It's a rhythm that creates an illusion of total control, one that depends entirely on fast communication, from the engine rooms to the bridge. Aboard the RMS Titanic in 1912, comfort is not shared equally. In first class, wide salons, constant service, and controlled silence reinforce a sense of safety. In second class, life is simpler, but still orderly. In third class, tight spaces hold families and workers together. That contrast exists only because, out of sight, the crew keeps the ship running without pause. On the night of April 14, 1912, the North Atlantic presents unusual conditions. The sea is unnaturally calm, with no waves breaking against the ice. There's no moon, erasing natural reflections on the horizon. In the intense cold and stable air, icebergs become little more than shadows. For the lookouts, spotting danger depends entirely on silhouettes, and on seconds that matter. Inside the RMS Titanic's radio room, messages flow constantly. Operators handle passenger telegrams, commercial traffic, and routine communications. At the same time, ice warnings continue to arrive from other ships. Each message demands attention, prioritization, and proper relay. In this crowded stream of information, critical details can be delayed by minutes, And those minutes make all the difference. Throughout the night of April 14th, ice warnings continue to reach the RMS Titanic. Messages are received, logged, and passed along according to the protocols of the time. On the bridge, officers maintain their navigation routine, adjusting positions and schedules. The steady flow of alerts doesn't trigger immediate alarm, but it adds to the growing load of information that must be interpreted quickly and accurately. As the night deepens, vigilance intensifies. On the bridge, officers hold course and speed, trusting calculations and accumulated experience. At the lookout posts, men face relentless cold and darkness, scanning the horizon for any shape out of place. Everything appears under control, but quiet, almost invisible decisions are shaping the ship's path, building a tension few can feel yet. With no moon overhead, the night becomes an almost empty visual field. The sea remains glassy, offering no foam against the ice to signal danger. High above the deck, lookouts strain their eyes for long minutes, fighting cold and darkness. Any object ahead must be identified by silhouette alone. The margin for reaction begins to shrink. The iceberg appears too late. When its shape finally breaks through the darkness, the response is immediate. The bell rings. Orders are shouted. Maneuvers begin without hesitation. Every action unfolds in seconds, not minutes. The margin for error is razor thin, and the time left to avoid impact disappears fast. Inside the ship, the impact feels like little more than a brief, unfamiliar vibration. In many areas, routine isn't even interrupted. Below the waterline, however, the damage is real and growing. Ice scrapes along the hull for several yards, opening fractures invisible to passengers. The gap between what's felt and what's happening creates a critical delay in recognizing the danger. After the collision, the watertight doors begin to close automatically. Officers head below to assess the damage and confirm early reports. Communication becomes concise and technical, grounded in what can be measured, minute by minute. If you want to follow, step by step, how these decisions shaped what came next, subscribe to the channel and stay with us in this detailed reconstruction. With the doors sealed, the most important countdown of the night begins. Water levels are measured compartment by compartment, while messengers cross the ship carrying numbers and observations. The information is still fragmented, but it already allows for an initial picture to form. In these early moments, one thing becomes clear. The problem isn't isolated, it's spreading. With the first data in hand, engineering takes center stage. The assessment isn't based on assumptions, but on the exact number of compartments breached. The ship's buoyancy has clear limits, defined on the drafting tables years earlier. As the numbers are compared, an objective reading emerges. If flooding continues at this rate, the margin of safety will vanish fast. Once the calculations are complete, the outlook shifts. What once seemed manageable is now treated as unavoidable. The priority moves from fixing the problem to buying time. Orders to prepare the lifeboats begin to circulate, and the radio room becomes a central hub. From this point on, every decision is weighed against what can still be saved. With the severity confirmed, the radio room turns into a command center. Distress signals are sent with priority, along with the ship's position. Replies begin to arrive, each with a distance and an estimated time. From this moment forward, the problem is no longer just technical. The clock is now competing directly with the ocean. Before panic takes hold, the crew initiates evacuation procedures. Canvas covers are pulled from the lifeboats, davits are unlocked, and positions are organized on deck. Everything is done with controlled calm, following rehearsed protocols. At this stage, the goal is to gain time and preserve order, preparing the scene before the full gravity of the situation becomes clear to everyone. As preparations continue, information begins to reach the passengers. The guidance is simple. Go up on deck, put on warm clothing, and wait for instructions. Along the way, staircases and corridors fill with people trying to understand what's happening. Messages arrive incomplete, mixed with speculation. The result is a growing noise, still contained, but impossible to ignore. The first lifeboats are lowered. The procedure is followed carefully, but hesitation is obvious. Many still don't believe the ship is in real danger, and boats aren't filled to capacity. Between short commands and long silences, each boat leaves with fewer people than it could carry, a detail that will weigh heavily in the minutes ahead. As the water advances, the deck begins to tilt noticeably. Walking becomes harder, and passenger flow loses its rhythm. Small crowds gather at access points, demanding constant control. Officers start reorganizing positions, adjusting routes, and enforcing order more firmly. Evacuation is no longer just technical, it becomes physical. Water reaches areas that were dry only moments before. Steps turn slick, lower spaces begin to flood, and the ship's metallic sounds change pitch. Still, electrical power remains on, keeping lights glowing and preserving a partial sense of normalcy. This contrast, visible flooding alongside functioning systems, confuses perceptions of danger and delays more drastic reactions. As time runs out, the plan begins to fracture. The final lifeboats are prepared under mounting pressure, davits operating without pause. Separations happen at access points, and final decisions are made in seconds. Early logic gives way to raw urgency. From here on, there's no room for full coordination, only rapid choices. The list increases, and the ship loses any remaining sense of normality. Objects slide on their own. Furniture shifts. Corridors once level turn into ramps. Every step requires effort, every movement calculation. Architecture designed for stability now works against those still on board. In the final minutes aboard, movement concentrates almost entirely on the deck. The angle is steep, and the sound of stressed structures dominates the air. Officers still attempt to coordinate isolated actions, even with few options left. Every movement demands strength, and every decision becomes final. The ship enters a phase where there's no correction, only execution to the very end. The ship disappears beneath the surface in a matter of minutes. The metallic noise fades, replaced by the silence of the ocean. Around it, lifeboats remain motionless, separated by darkness and distance. Water now fills the space once occupied by light, structure, and motion. What remains is a fractured scene, defined by absence and the relentless cold of the sea. After the sinking, survival becomes the only priority. In the lifeboats, cold takes hold quickly, and counting people becomes essential. Some boats attempt to scan the surroundings, but searching the sea is limited by darkness and distance. Every minute feels longer, as the hope of rescue rests solely on time and human endurance. When the rescue ship finally appears on the horizon, waiting ends and shock begins. Survivors are lifted from the boats one by one, many in absolute silence. Counting becomes precise, and numbers stop being estimates. In that moment, the true scale of the tragedy sets in, replacing hope with the weight of confirmed facts. In the aftermath, investigations begin. Testimonies, technical reports, and radio logs are examined together. It becomes clear that ice, radio limitations, lifeboat capacity, and established procedures all converged in just 30 decisive minutes. It wasn't a single mistake, but a chain of choices made under pressure. Those minutes changed the rules of maritime safety forever.